Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tearing apart the actual mechanics of fear. Seriously, if you've ever wanted to know exactly how to create a horror story, it turns out you don't even need to make it up, because reality already wrote the perfect blueprint. We're going to deconstruct this incredibly well-documented, utterly terrifying night ride taken by two friends, Chandrakant and Amit, in the Indian state of Odisha. And as we break down their absolutely harrowing account, you're going to see how their journey literally maps flawlessly onto the ultimate classic template for a horror narrative. It's like a masterclass in terror, happening in real life. But to really get how this works, we got to start right in the thick of it. Picture this. It's 12:15 a.m. on a completely dead highway. Our guys, Chandrakant and Amit, get pulled over by a night patrol. Now, you'd think they're just getting a ticket, right? Nope. When the officers hear where these guys are heading, the entire patrol unit literally freezes in shock. The senior inspector doesn't just give them a warning and let them go. No, he orders his men to photograph the boys, their IDs, their motorcycle, the whole shebang. He's documenting them, almost like he's preparing for the very real possibility that they might never be seen alive again. It is that classic, perfect in medias res moment of dread that sets those ultimate life or death stakes. But how on earth did they end up here? Let's rewind a bit. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the deceptive setup. Because every great horror story, it always kicks off with a totally, deceptively mundane inciting incident. For Chandrakant and Amit, the setup wasn't some crazy dare or a midnight ghost hunt. It was just a brutal road trip driven by young romance. They hit the road from their hometown of Raikia way early, like 5:30 in the morning, just to visit their girlfriends who lived miles apart. Fast forward to the evening, they've logged a grueling 220 kilometers and are totally ready to just crash at a lodge in Jaipur. But at 8:30 p.m., the trap snaps shut. Amit gets that dreaded after-hours call from his office. There's a massive error in a report, and get this, he's going to be fired if he doesn't hand-deliver a fix by 9 a.m. the very next morning. As far as narrative mechanics go, it's brilliant. You've got sheer panic, exhaustion, and an unavoidable deadline forcing two very tired friends back out onto a pitch-black, unfamiliar road. Which brings us to Section 2, the ominous harbingers. Look, if you want to create a horror story, you've got to have those locals who frantically warn the travelers to turn back. It's a staple. And in this real-life account, reality delivered three massive escalating chances for these guys to just turn around and save themselves. First up, around 9 p.m., this seasoned truck driver at a roadside dhaba hears their route and just flat-out refuses to explain why he won't drive it at night. He just cryptically tells them to wait for the sun. Then, we hit that first police checkpoint I mentioned earlier, the one where their photos were taken like crime scene evidence. And finally, the ultimate warning. At 2 a.m., they roll up to the Narla checkpoint. But it's not just a signpost, it's a literal physical barricade manned by like 20 to 25 heavily armed officers blocking the road into the Rampur forest, warning them about criminal activity and vigilantes. Right before they finally convince the police to let them through, because of that crazy office emergency, an officer drops this specific, absolutely chilling line. Pay attention to the phrasing here. He doesn't just stick to the excuse about criminals, he pivots. Wild animals and strange things happen. It just injects this heavy, undeniable sense of impending doom. The boys have officially crossed the threshold, completely ignoring literally every red flag the universe threw their way. So let's move right into Section 3, the impossible missing passenger. Because to truly create a horror story, you need that exact moment where reality starts to fracture, where the basic rules of physics just stop applying. That crucial breaking point happens during this massive, sudden downpour. The boys pull over into a little roadside cow shelter to wait it out, standing shoulder to shoulder. But when the rain finally breaks, Chandrakant looks over and notices something deeply, deeply wrong. Chandrakant is absolutely soaked to the bone. Water's literally pooling inside his boots. But Amit is completely, inexplicably dry. Not a single drop of water on him. It makes zero sense. Amit just brushes it off, telling him they need to hurry. But the glitch in reality has happened, right? That creeping unease is totally palpable now. And then, just 3 kilometers later, that psychological unease shatters into full-blown panic. Chandrakant gets stopped by some armed villagers on the road. When he mentions his friend sitting right behind him on the bike, the villager drops this terrifying bombshell. Chandrakant is entirely alone. Amit is gone, vanished. The shock is absolute. That is, until a few minutes later, when a Tata Sumo pulls up and Amit just steps out. He claims Chandrakant left him behind at that police checkpoint miles and miles back. He has zero memory of the rain, the cow shelter, or any of the ride. The narrative has successfully isolated our protagonist's mind right before it isolates his body.
And that takes us to Section 4, Isolation in the Forest. The pacing drastically slows down right here.
So, with Amit back on the bike, both of them quiet and incredibly unsettled, they cross into the pitch-black Rampur forest, about 12 kilometers past this place called Dumity Band. Just put yourself in their shoes for a second. The tree canopy is so dense it completely blots out the moon. Their only light is the dying, flickering headlamp of the motorcycle. And then, the physical environment itself turns against them. Going up a super steep hill, their heavy loaded motorcycle suddenly feels completely weightless. But then as they crest the hill, expecting to just coast rapidly down the other side, they hit this invisible wall. The bike literally crawls to a halt on a steep downhill slope. It's as if this immense unseen force is physically pushing back against their front tire. As the literal physics of the road just completely fail them, the bike is forced onto the shoulder into this sudden, blindingly thick fog. And that's when Amit leans into Chandrakant's ear and whispers this: "I feel someone coming from behind." The isolation is absolute. They're totally trapped, can't move forward, and a real threat is closing in from the dark.
And this brilliantly illustrates the big monster reveal of our structure. Section 5, The Grieving Apparition. As they're sitting there completely paralyzed on the side of the road, a figure actually emerges through the dense fog, lit only by the bike's weak fog lights. It's a woman in stark white clothing. Her face is totally hidden by messy white hair, and she's slowly dragging this heavy sack behind her. The account details this macabre, deeply ritualistic sequence that unfolds right in front of them. It's so specific. She crosses the road, sits down, and opens the sack. She pulls out the actual skeleton of a small child and rests it on her lap. Then she meticulously rubs turmeric onto areas of dried blood on the bones, and finally, breaks a flower garland to place over the remains. It is a sequence of pure, unadulterated dread. The sheer mundane specificity of what she's doing makes the horror feel so incredibly grounded and real.
20 minutes. The woman starts wailing. Just a loud, piercing, unearthly cry echoing through the pitch-black forest. Chandrakant and Amit sit absolutely, deathly frozen on their motorcycle for 20 agonizing, freezing minutes. I really want you to internalize that amount of time. Think about it. Sitting in the dark, unable to start your engine, completely at the mercy of whatever this entity happens to be.
Throughout that entire agonizing wait, Chandrakant is repeating one desperate rule in his head: do not get off the motorcycle. When the woman finally stops wailing and stands up, they don't even dare try to kickstart the engine. They silently, desperately just paddle the heavy bike forward using only their feet. As they finally manage to glide past her, Chandrakant makes the ultimate horror movie mistake. He glances back, and he sees the woman, no longer standing on the road, but hanging by her neck from a tree branch. Which brings us to the final, necessary chapter of any great horror template. Section 6, The Tragic Origin Story. The boys flee, and miraculously the bike engine kicks into gear as they roll down the slope. The second dawn breaks, they run into an old villager a few kilometers down the road and frantically spill everything they just saw. And the villager? He doesn't laugh at them. Not at all. Instead, he delivers this incredibly grim confirmation. By staying glued to that bike, Chandrakant and Amit inadvertently followed the ultimate, unspoken rule of survival in the Rampur forest. You see, the villager shares the tragic backstory that birthed this whole legend. Years ago, a family riding a motorcycle had a catastrophic head-on collision with a car right on that exact stretch of road. The husband died instantly. The mother, desperate and terrified, tried to carry her bleeding 7-month-old daughter to get help. But the child tragically succumbed to a head wound, which perfectly explains the blood and the specific ritual the boys witnessed. Overwhelmed by absolute blinding grief, the mother refused any help from passing villagers, and the very next morning she was found hanging from a tree. Now local lore says her spirit wanders that highway, preying on passersby through deception, which honestly cast Amit's bizarre disappearance and reappearance in a completely new, terrifying light.
So, the mechanics of this real-life account perfectly mirror exactly how to create a horror story. You've got the mundane setup, the totally ignored warnings, the profound isolation, the reality-bending encounters, and finally, the tragic lore tying it all together. But unpacking all of that leaves us with one final, very real thought. Think about human nature for a second. Think about your own survival instincts. If it was you, trapped on that foggy forest highway, your engine dead, watching something impossible unfold in the dark,